Hey everyone, welcome to Watch the Stories. Here we bring you the most emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable tales from every corner of life. So sit back, relax, and get ready to feel every emotion. Because this is where stories come alive. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, watching Emma skip toward the lake through my rearview mirror. She looked so small in her pink swimsuit, her backpack bouncing with each excited step. It was supposed to be a perfect summer day at Crystal Lake. Just another Saturday, where kids splashed in the water while parents lounged on checkered blankets with thermoses of coffee and paperback novels. I should have known better. I should have seen the signs. "Mom, can I go now, please?" Emma had begged that morning, her hazel eyes wide with hope. She'd been talking about this lake trip with her school friends for weeks. After the year she'd had, switching schools, my divorce from her father, the move to this new town, I wanted to give her something normal, something fun. "Of course, sweetheart," I'd said, kissing her forehead. "Just stay where I can see you, okay?" Now, as I stepped out of my car and surveyed the beach, that maternal instinct, the one that had kept Emma safe through scraped knees and chicken pox, began whispering warnings I couldn't quite interpret. The other mothers smiled at me with that polite, distant friendliness that new people always receive in small towns. Their children, already bronzed from a summer of swimming, clustered in groups that seemed to have invisible borders Emma couldn't cross. I spread my blanket near the water's edge, close enough to watch, close enough to protect. Emma waded into the shallows and I felt my shoulders relax slightly. She was fine. She was safe. I pulled out my book, though I barely read a word, my eyes constantly flicking up to check on her. That's when I noticed them. 3 teenage girls, maybe 16 or 17, watching Emma with expressions that made my stomach knot. They whispered to each other, their eyes cold and calculating in a way that teenage girls' eyes should never be. I recognized the ringleader, Madison Cooper, daughter of the town's wealthiest family. I'd seen her at the grocery store speaking to the cashier with that particular brand of cruelty that comes from never being told no. I sat up straighter, book forgotten. Madison and her friends began moving toward Emma with the slow, predatory grace of sharks circling prey. My daughter, oblivious, was trying to befriend a younger girl building a sandcastle. She was always doing that, reaching out to the lonely ones, the left-out ones. It was one of the things I loved most about her, even as I feared it would get her hurt. "Emma," I called out, but my voice was lost in the general noise of the beach, screaming children splashing water, someone's radio playing pop music. I watched, helpless, as Madison approached my daughter. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Emma's face change. The smile faltered. Her shoulders hunched inward in that universal posture of a child being made to feel small. I was already on my feet, already moving, but the sand seemed to grab at my ankles, slowing me down like a nightmare where you run but never get anywhere. Madison said something else, and her friends laughed. That particular teenage girl laugh that's designed to cut like glass. Emma's face flushed red, and I saw her mouth form words that were probably an apology for some imagined slight. Then it happened so fast I almost couldn't process it. Madison grabbed Emma's arm. Emma pulled back, trying to break free. One of the other girls, a blonde with a vicious smile, pushed Emma from behind. And Madison, with a shove that was clearly deliberate, sent my daughter stumbling backward into deeper water. Emma's arms windmilled. Her eyes went wide with panic. She'd only learned to swim last year and she wasn't confident yet. I saw the exact moment she went under, her small body swallowed by the murky lake water. "Emma!" The scream tore from my throat, raw and primal. I was running now, really running, my feet pounding the sand and then splashing into the water. Other parents were looking up, confusion turning to alarm on their faces. But I only had eyes for the spot where my daughter had disappeared, where ripples were spreading across the surface like accusatory fingers pointing at what those girls had done. Madison and her friends stood frozen, their expressions shifting from triumphant to uncertain. They'd meant to humiliate Emma, to give her a dunking she'd never forget. But as seconds ticked by and Emma didn't surface, their smirks began to crack. "She can't swim very well," I heard myself screaming as I plunged deeper into the water. "She can't..." And then I saw her, Emma's small hand breaking the surface, grasping at air, at life, at anything. Her face emerged for just a second, water streaming from her mouth as she gasped, and then she went under again. Everything became crystal clear in that moment. The world narrowed to a single point. Save my daughter. Nothing else mattered. Not the onlookers gathering at the shore. Not Madison Cooper's suddenly pale face. Not my own safety. I dove under, my hands searching blindly through the murky water. My fingers brushed fabric, Emma's swimsuit, and I grabbed hold, pulling her up with strength I didn't know I possessed. We broke the surface together, Emma coughing and sputtering, her small arms wrapping around my neck so tightly I could barely breathe. "I've got you, baby. I've got you," I gasped, struggling toward the shore with Emma clinging to me like a desperate starfish. By the time I reached shallow water, a crowd had gathered. Someone wrapped a towel around Emma's shaking shoulders. Someone else was asking if they should call 911, but I was focused entirely on my daughter, checking her breathing, her pulse, making sure she was really okay. Emma's teeth chattered as she pressed her face into my shoulder. "Those girls," she whispered, her voice small and broken. They said I didn't belong here, that I should go back where I came from. When I tried to walk away, White-hot rage flooded through me, so intense it was almost physically painful. I looked up at Madison and her friends who were trying to slip away into the crowd. Their earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Stop right there," I commanded, my voice carrying across the beach with unexpected authority. Madison froze. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Good. She should be afraid. But before I could say another word, my phone rang. Through my soaked shorts, I felt the vibration. With trembling hands, I pulled it out. Somehow it was still working. The caller ID made my heart skip. Marcus, my brother. Emma's uncle. The one person in the world those girls should have been terrified of crossing. "Sarah?" His deep voice came through the speaker, concerned. "I was calling to see if you wanted to grab dinner tonight. Are you okay? You sound strange." I looked at my traumatized daughter, then at Madison Cooper's smug face. She'd already recovered her composure, clearly confident that nothing would really happen to her. She was right, probably. Girls like her never faced real consequences, but she didn't know about Marcus. "Actually," I said slowly, my voice deadly calm, "I need you to come to Crystal Lake. Right now." "What happened?" I kept my eyes locked on Madison. "Someone just tried to hurt Emma." There was a long pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed, dropped into a register that I'd only heard a handful of times in my life. The voice that had made grown men back down in bars, the voice that had sent my abusive ex-husband running for his lawyer. "I'm 20 minutes away," he said quietly. "Don't let them leave. 20 minutes. I just had to keep everyone there for 20 minutes. Emma shivered in my arms despite the warm towel someone had draped over her shoulders. I could feel her small heart hammering against my chest, matching the furious rhythm of my own. Around us, the cheerful sounds of the beach had died into uncomfortable murmurs as people tried to figure out what exactly they'd witnessed. "I think we should go," Madison said loudly, her voice carrying that particular teenage inflection that made everything sound like a question while being a statement. Her friends nodded eagerly, already reaching for their designer beach bags. "No," I said firmly, standing up with Emma still in my arms. My daughter was 8 years old but suddenly felt weightless, made of nothing but fear and lake water. "You're not going anywhere." Madison's mother, Patricia Cooper, materialized from somewhere in the crowd. She was exactly what you'd expect. Highlighted blonde hair, tennis bracelet catching the sunlight, expression of perpetual mild offense that wealthy women seem to perfect around age 40. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But you can't tell my daughter what to do. If there was some kind of accident—" "Accident?" The word came out like a slap. I carefully sat Emma down, making sure she was steady on her feet, before turning my full attention to Patricia Cooper. "Your daughter and her friends deliberately pushed my child into the lake. Emma could have drowned." "Oh, please," Madison interjected, rolling her eyes with the casual cruelty only a teenager can manage. "It was just a joke. She barely even went under." "Stop being so dramatic." Several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. I saw a few sympathetic looks, but no one spoke up. That's how it always works in towns like this. Everyone knows everyone, and no one wants to rock the boat, especially when it's the Cooper's boat. "Emma?" a quiet voice said. I turned to see the little girl Emma had been playing with earlier, the one building the sandcastle. She couldn't have been more than 6, with dark braids and eyes too serious for her age. Emma was trying to help me. Those big girls said mean things to her, and when she didn't leave, they pushed her. I saw it. Mia, hush, her mother said quickly, shooting an apologetic look at Patricia Cooper. Don't make up stories. I'm not making up. Mia, enough. I watched the little girl's face crumble, watched her mother choose social standing over truth, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. This was how it happened. This was how girls like Madison learned they could get away with anything. Because everyone around them was too concerned with keeping the peace to demand justice. Mrs. Hartley, Patricia said, trying a different approach, her voice softening into what she probably thought was reasonable. I understand you're upset. Moving to a new town is stressful and children can misinterpret social situations. Why don't we all just take a breath and— My daughter nearly drowned, I interrupted. And you want me to take a breath? Actually, a new voice cut in, male, authoritative, wearing the khaki uniform of a park ranger. I'd like to know what happened here. We take safety very seriously at Crystal Lake. Finally, someone official. I opened my mouth to explain, but Patricia beat me to it. Ranger Mitchell, thank goodness. There's been a misunderstanding. The children were playing. You know how rough kids can be. And this woman is making accusations about my daughter that are simply untrue. I think she might be one of those helicopter parents who— I'd like to hear from the child, Ranger Mitchell said, crouching down to Emma's level. He had kind eyes, I noticed, and a gentle voice. Sweetheart, can you tell me what happened? Emma's hand tightened in mine. She looked up at me, and I saw the calculation in her young eyes, the weighing of truth against consequence, the fear of making things worse. How many times had I seen that exact expression in the mirror when I was married to her father? It's okay, I whispered. Tell the truth. I promise you're safe. They pushed me, Emma said quietly. The big girls. They said I didn't belong here and I should leave. When I tried to walk away, Her voice broke. I was under the water and I couldn't breathe, and I thought she dissolved into tears. And I pulled her close, glaring at Patricia Cooper over my daughter's head. Ranger Mitchell stood up, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Cooper, I'm going to need to speak with Madison and her friends, separately. This is ridiculous, Patricia huffed. My husband is on the city council. We donate to the park service. And you're treating my daughter like a criminal because some woman who just moved here can't control her child. Mom? Madison's voice had changed, lost some of its confidence. Maybe we should just go. This is getting weird. We're not going anywhere until this is resolved, Patricia snapped, then seemed to realize how that sounded. I mean, of course we'll cooperate with Ranger Mitchell. We have nothing to hide. I checked my phone. 12 minutes since I'd called Marcus. 12 more minutes of keeping everyone here, of watching Patricia Cooper's performance of innocence, of seeing Madison and her friends exchange nervous glances, as they realized this might not blow over as easily as their previous incidents probably had. Because I knew, deep in my bones, this wasn't the first time. Girls don't develop that kind of casual cruelty overnight. They practice it, refine it, perfect it on victims whose mothers don't make waves. But I wasn't that kind of mother. Ranger Mitchell, I said, pulling out my phone. I'd like to file an official report. I have witnesses. Witnesses who are afraid to speak because the Coopers run this town, Madison's blonde friend muttered, then looked shocked at her own boldness. Jenna, Patricia's voice cracked like a whip, but Jenna was already backing away, her face flushing. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cooper, but Madison said nothing would happen. She said it would be funny to scare the new girl, and I didn't think— Shut up, Jenna, Madison hissed, and there it was. The crack in the facade. Ranger Mitchell's eyebrows rose, and even Patricia Cooper looked momentarily stunned. The crowd's energy shifted. People who had been edging away, ready to return to their peaceful Saturday, now leaned in with renewed interest. Someone whispered, Did she just admit? My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, 5 minutes out. How's Emma? I looked at my daughter, traumatized but alive, safe in the circle of my arms, and typed back, She'll be okay. But Marcus, these girls need to understand what they've done. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then they will. I promise. I knew that tone, even in text form. Marcus wasn't coming here as concerned uncle. He was coming as something else entirely. Something Patricia Cooper and her daughter had no framework to understand. Because people like them lived in a world where consequences were abstract concepts that happened to other people. While we wait for the ranger to finish his investigation, I said calmly, We're going to wait for my brother. He'll want to hear what happened to his niece. Your brother? Patricia laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. And what exactly is your brother going to do? This isn't the Wild West, you can't just— She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes had fixed on something over my shoulder, and the color drained from her face. I turned. Marcus had arrived early. Even from a distance, Marcus commanded attention in a way that made people instinctively step back. 6'4" of solid muscle, dressed in black tactical pants and a fitted t-shirt that revealed arms covered in tattoos. Not the trendy kind you got at hipster parlors, but the kind that told stories of places and things most people only saw in movies. His hair was cropped military short, and he wore sunglasses that hid eyes I knew were scanning the scene with trained precision. But it wasn't just his appearance. It was the way he moved. Purposeful, controlled, like a predator who never rushed because he knew nothing could escape him. People in the crowd parted without realizing they were doing it, creating a pathway straight to where I stood with Emma. "Uncle Marcus," Emma's face transformed. She broke away from me and ran to him, and I watched my brother, this man who'd done things in dark places that he'd never tell me about, drop to one knee and catch my daughter in a hug so gentle it made my throat tight. "Hey, princess," he murmured, his voice soft in a way only Emma ever heard. "I'm here now. Nobody's gonna hurt you." He stood, lifting Emma effortlessly, and only then did he remove his sunglasses. His eyes, pale gray, unsettling in their intensity, swept across the beach, taking in every detail: the wet towel, Emma's shaking hands, the cluster of teenage girls trying very hard to look anywhere but at him, Patricia Cooper's strained smile. "Sarah," he said, finally looking at me. "Tell me exactly what happened." I did. I kept my voice steady and factual, but inside I was grateful, so desperately grateful that Marcus had come. Not because I needed a man to fight my battles, but because sometimes, in a world that dismisses women's fury as hysteria, you need someone whose very presence demands respect. When I finished, Marcus was silent for a long moment. He set Emma down carefully, kissing the top of her head, then straightened to his full height. "The temperature on the beach seemed to drop 10 degrees. Which one?" he asked quietly. It wasn't really a question. His eyes had already found Madison, who was doing her best to look bored and unimpressed, though I noticed she'd moved slightly behind her mother. "Mr. Patricia started, her voice bright with false friendliness. "Reeves. Marcus Reeves." He didn't offer his hand. "You must be the mother of the girl who tried to drown my niece." "Now wait just a minute." "No." The single word cut through Patricia's protest like a blade. "You wait. Your daughter, along with her friends, assaulted an 8-year-old child. They pushed her into water they knew she couldn't handle. That's not bullying. That's not kids being kids. That's attempted manslaughter at worst, assault at best." Madison scoffed, a sound that immediately drew Marcus's attention. He took a step toward her, and I saw her bravado crack. She wasn't used to people who weren't impressed by her last name or her father's position or her family's money. "You think this is funny?" Marcus asked, his voice still quiet. The kind of quiet that's more frightening than shouting. "You think nearly killing a child is amusing?" "I didn't. She's fine, isn't she? Stop being so dramatic." But Madison's voice wavered. "She's fine because her mother got to her in time. But you didn't know that would happen, did you? You pushed her into that water and then you stood there and watched. What were you thinking in those seconds before Sarah pulled Emma out? Were you thinking about what you'd tell the police? What you'd say to your parents? How you'd explain why there was a dead 8-year-old in the water?" "Marcus," I said softly, putting a hand on his arm. Not to stop him, but to remind him Emma was listening. He nodded slightly, but his eyes never left Madison. "I've seen a lot of bad things in my life. I've seen people do terrible things to each other. But you know what I've never seen? I've never seen someone get away with hurting a child without eventually facing consequences." "Is that a threat?" Patricia demanded, though her voice shook slightly. "Because your husband is on the city council. I know. Everyone keeps saying it like it's a magical shield." Marcus finally looked at Patricia, and I saw her actually take a step back. "But here's what you don't know about me, Mrs. Cooper. I spent 12 years in special forces. I've worked personal security for people whose names you'd recognize. I've trained police departments in crisis response. And I've got connections in this state and this town that make your husband's council position look like a hobby." This wasn't entirely true. Marcus had been in the military, yes, and he did security consulting now. But he was embellishing. I recognized his tone. The one he used when he needed people to believe he was more dangerous than he actually was. Usually that was enough. "What exactly are you saying?" Ranger Mitchell asked, stepping forward. He'd been quietly observing, and I couldn't read his expression. Marcus turned to him and his demeanor shifted, still serious but more professional. "I'm saying that I want this incident properly documented and investigated. I want statements from everyone who saw what happened. I want to know if this is the first time these girls have done something like this, or if there's a pattern. And I want to know what consequences they're going to face." "This is insane," Madison burst out. "You can't do this." "It was just what?" Marcus interrupted. "Just a joke? Just harmless fun? Just something you did because you were bored and Emma was new, and you thought she was an easy target?" He moved closer and Madison actually pressed back against her mother. "Let me tell you something about just jokes. When I was deployed, I saw what happens when people think it's just okay to hurt others who are weaker, or different or new. It starts small. A push, a threat, a laugh, and then it escalates, and then people die. You're comparing this to war?" Patricia sputtered. "I'm comparing it to human nature. The willingness to hurt someone because you can, because you think there won't be consequences." He looked around the beach at all the faces watching. "Everyone here saw what happened. Some of you even spoke up. Thank you, by the way, to the little girl who told the truth. The rest of you? You were going to let it slide. Let these girls learn that they can hurt people and walk away clean." Mia's mother flushed but said nothing. Marcus pulled out his phone. "Ranger Mitchell, you're going to do your job and investigate this properly, right?" "Of course," Mitchell said carefully. "I take all incidents seriously." "Good, because I'm calling Sheriff Davidson right now. He's an old friend. We served together in Afghanistan. I'm going to ask him to come down here personally and make sure this gets handled by the book." He paused. "Unless there's a problem with that?" Patricia Cooper looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's expression stopped her. Maybe she was realizing that her usual advantages, money, status, connections, weren't going to work here. Maybe she was seeing for the first time that her daughter had picked on the wrong family. "This is all highly unnecessary," she said stiffly. Madison apologized to the girl. "We're leaving." "No," I said, finding my voice again. "You heard Marcus. Nobody leaves until this is properly documented. You can't keep us here." "Actually," Ranger Mitchell interjected, "if Mr. Reeves is filing a formal complaint, I do need statements from everyone involved. You're free to leave, Mrs. Cooper, but if you do, the report will reflect your refusal to cooperate with the investigation." Patricia's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "This is ridiculous. My daughter is being persecuted because your child can't swim properly and—" "Stop." Marcus's voice cut through her tirade. "Every word you say right now is making this worse for your daughter. If I were you, I'd be quiet, cooperate with the investigation, and start thinking about getting Madison a very good lawyer." The crowd had grown. More people had wandered over, drawn by the commotion, and I could see phones out recording. In the age of social media, Patricia Cooper's worst nightmare was unfolding. A public incident that couldn't be swept under the rug or smoothed over with donations and dinner parties. Marcus made his call to the sheriff, speaking in low tones. Emma stayed close to me, watching her uncle with something like awe. She'd always loved Marcus, but this was different. This was seeing him as her protector, her champion, the person who made the bad things stop. "Mommy," she whispered, "is Uncle Marcus going to arrest them?" "No, baby, but he's going to make sure they understand what they did was wrong." "Will they get in trouble? Real trouble?" I looked at Madison, who was crying now. Not from remorse, I suspected, but from the unfamiliar experience of facing consequences. "Yes," I said. "I think they will." Sheriff Davidson arrived 15 minutes later, and the beach cleared rapidly as people realized this wasn't going to be entertainment anymore. It was going to be serious. Sheriff Davidson was nothing like I'd expected. He was shorter than Marcus, with kind eyes and a slight limp. Legacy of an IED in Kandahar, Marcus told me later. But when he surveyed the scene, taking in Emma's tear-stained face and Madison's defiant posture, his expression hardened into something that made even Patricia Cooper fall silent. "Marcus," he said, clasping my brother's hand. "Been a while." "Too long, Tom. Wish it was under better circumstances." "Me too." Davidson turned to me. "You must be Sarah. Marcus has told me about you and Emma. I'm sorry this happened." The simple acknowledgement made tears prick my eyes. After an hour of being dismissed, gaslit, and talked over, having someone in authority actually believe me felt overwhelming. "Let's start from the beginning," Davidson said, pulling out a notebook. "Emma, honey, I know you've had a scary day, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened in your own words." "Can you do that?" Emma nodded and began to speak. Her voice was small at first, but as she went on, it grew stronger. She told him about trying to make friends with Mia, about Madison and her friends approaching, about the cruel words and the sudden push. She described the panic of going under, the burn in her lungs the moment she thought she might not make it back to the surface. Madison's blonde friend, Jenna, had gone pale. "I didn't think," she started, then stopped. "Go on," Davidson encouraged. "I didn't think she'd actually go under like that. Madison said it would just be a quick dunk just to scare her a little. But then she didn't come up right away and I—" Jenna's voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I should have helped her." "But you didn't," Davidson said quietly. "You stood there and watched. Why?" "Because Madison said—" Jenna glanced at her friend, then away. "She said if we didn't back her up, she'd make sure we regretted it. She said her dad could get us banned from the lake, could make trouble for our families. She said—" Tears spilled down Jenna's cheeks. "She says a lot of things. And I'm so tired of being scared of her." The confession hung in the air. Madison's other friend shifted uncomfortably, and I saw her mother pull her aside, whispering urgently, "More cracks in the facade." "Mrs. Cooper," Davidson said, "I'd like to speak with Madison. You can be present, of course, but I need her to answer some questions." Patricia drew herself up. "My daughter doesn't have to answer anything without a lawyer present. That's absolutely her right. But I should tell you that I've already spoken with several witnesses who confirm the basic facts. Your daughter and her friends approached Emma. There was some kind of altercation, and Emma ended up in the water, unable to surface on her own. Whether Madison talks to me now or later, there will be an investigation." "Investigation?" Patricia's voice rose. "For what? Children horsing around at a beach? For assault, potentially. Reckless endangerment, depending on how the county attorney sees it." Davidson's tone was matter-of-fact. "A child was pushed into water beyond her swimming ability and nearly drowned. That's not horsing around, Mrs. Cooper, that's a crime. This is insane. Madison is a child herself." "Madison is 16, Marcus interjected. "Old enough to drive a car. Old enough to know that actions have consequences. Old enough to understand that pushing a helpless 8-year-old into deep water could kill her. It was an accident." Madison finally found her voice shrill with panic. "I didn't mean for her to go under. I just wanted to—" "To what?" I asked, stepping forward. "To humiliate her? To show her that she doesn't belong? To prove that you and your friends run this beach and everyone else is just—" "What? Here at your sufferance?" Madison's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "Here's what's going to happen," Davidson said. "I'm taking statements from everyone who witnessed the incident. I'm filing a formal report, and then the county attorney will decide whether to press charges. In the meantime, Madison, you're banned from this beach pending the outcome of the investigation." "You can't do that," Patricia gasped. "I can and I am. This is a public facility. And if someone poses a safety risk to other visitors, I have the authority to restrict their access." He paused. "Frankly, Mrs. Cooper, you should be grateful that's all I'm doing right now." Patricia looked ready to explode, but then she seemed to remember all the phones pointed in her direction, all the witnesses watching. She grabbed Madison's arm. "Come on, we're leaving." "And you?" She jabbed a finger at Marcus. "You haven't heard the last of this. My husband—" "Your husband has no authority over me or my family," Marcus said calmly. "But please feel free to have him call me. I'd be happy to explain to him why his daughter nearly killed my niece and what kind of person that makes her." They left in a storm of indignation and half-formed threats, Madison crying and protesting, Patricia on her phone presumably calling her husband or their lawyer or both. The third girl, who'd barely spoken the entire time, slipped away with her mother, looking relieved to escape the situation. Only Jenna remained, standing apart from her parents, tears streaming down her face. "Sheriff Davidson," she said quietly, "there's something else you should know." We all turned to her. Davidson nodded encouragingly. "I'm listening. This isn't the first time. Madison, she's done things like this before. Not exactly like this, but Jenna's voice trembled. Last summer there was another new girl. Madison convinced her to swim out to the floating platform even though the girl said she wasn't a strong swimmer. The girl barely made it back. She transferred schools after that. Why didn't anyone report it, I asked. Because Madison's dad is on the city council. Because the Coopers donate to everything. Because... Jenna looked at me with eyes too old for her 16 years. Because in this town, the Coopers always win. At least they always have before. Not this time, Marcus said quietly. Davidson took Jenna's statement, along with contact information for the girl from last summer. He spoke with Mia, whose mother, to her credit, allowed her daughter to tell the truth this time. He talked to other witnesses, including a man who'd taken video on his phone of the immediate aftermath. By the time he was done, it was late afternoon. Emma had fallen asleep in Marcus's arms, exhausted by fear and adrenaline and the emotional toll of the day. I felt hollowed out, running on nothing but protective fury and sheer stubbornness. What happens now? I asked Davidson as he was packing up. I file my report. The county attorney reviews it. Given the evidence and witness statements, I'd say, there's a strong case for juvenile charges, probably assault in the 4th degree, maybe reckless endangerment. Madison will likely face some combination of community service, counseling, and probation. The other girls too, though probably less severe since they're cooperating. That's it? Marcus's voice was hard. She nearly kills a child and gets community service? She's a juvenile with no prior record, Davidson said. I don't like it any more than you do, but that's how the system works. However, he added, seeing Marcus's expression, there are other consequences, social consequences. This is a small town, Marcus. What happened here today? It's going to spread. The Cooper's reputation is going to take a hit. Madison's going to find that her social currency isn't worth what it used to be. He was right. I could already see it happening. The way people were looking at us with sympathy now instead of wariness. The conversations happening in hushed tones around the parking lot. The phones uploading videos to social media with hashtags I could already imagine. Thank you, I said to Davidson, for taking this seriously. Thank you for not letting them sweep it under the rug. He nodded to Marcus. You've got a good family here. Take care of them. After he left, it was just the 3 of us in the parking lot. Marcus still holding Emma, me standing beside them, all of us marked by the day's events in ways that would take time to understand. I'm staying for a few days, Marcus said. Maybe longer. I want to make sure Emma's okay, that there's no retaliation. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She's my niece. You're my sister. And nobody hurts my family. His voice softened. Nobody. I leaned against him, feeling the solid strength that had gotten me through so many hard times, the divorce, the move, the endless challenges of being a single mother in a new place. But this was different. This was Marcus, standing between my daughter and the people who thought they could hurt her without consequence. Marcus? Emma's sleepy voice drifted up. Are the bad girls going to leave me alone now? Yes, Princess, they're going to leave you alone. Because you're scary? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Something like that. Good. Emma snuggled closer. I'm glad you're scary when you need to be. Aren't we all, I thought. Aren't we all? The story went viral. Not in the way I expected or wanted, but in the inevitable way things do when they tap into something larger than themselves. Someone's phone. Video, grainy but clear enough, showed Madison pushing Emma. Showed Emma disappearing under the water, showed me screaming and running. By Sunday morning it had been shared thousands of times with captions ranging from, "Rich girl nearly drowns child at lake," to, "This is why we need to take bullying seriously." The Coopers tried to control the narrative. Patricia gave a statement to the local paper about how the incident was being blown out of proportion and how Madison was devastated by the accident. But for once, their PR machine couldn't quite smooth away the truth. Too many people had been there. Too many witnesses. Too many years of the Coopers getting away with things finally catching up to them in the bright, unforgiving light of social media. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Other parents reached out with their own stories of Madison's cruelty. The school district launched an investigation into incidents of bullying that had apparently been going on for years, but never quite made it into official reports. Marcus stayed as promised. He set up in my guest room and made himself useful, fixing the leaky faucet I'd been meaning to deal with, helping Emma practice swimming in the community pool, with professional supervision this time, and making it very clear to anyone who asked that he was Emma's uncle and he wasn't going anywhere. On Wednesday, we received a call from the county attorney's office. Madison Cooper was being charged with assault in the 4th degree and reckless endangerment. Her friends faced lesser charges. There would be a juvenile court hearing in 3 weeks. Patricia Cooper's response came through her lawyer, a letter accusing me of orchestrating a campaign of harassment against Madison and threatening a civil lawsuit for emotional distress and defamation. I called Marcus when I received it, my hands shaking with anger. They're threatening to sue me for protecting my daughter, for telling the truth about what happened. Let them try, Marcus said calmly. I know some very good lawyers who'd love to take this case. Pro bono, probably, given how much press it's getting. Plus, discovery works both ways. If they sue you, we get to subpoena all kinds of interesting information about Madison's past behavior. He was right, of course. The lawsuit threat was bluster, a desperate attempt by the Coopers to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond their ability to manage. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for days, a reminder of how some people would rather attack the messenger than acknowledge the message. But something else was happening too. Something better. Emma made friends. Real friends, not the kind who tolerated her presence, but the kind who sought her out. Other kids who'd been on the edges, too scared or too new or too different to fit into the established hierarchies. They gravitated toward each other at the park, at the library, at the places in town that didn't belong to the Coopers. Mia's mother called to apologize for initially not believing her daughter. I was scared, she admitted. Scared of making waves, of making things harder for Mia. But I see now that staying silent just makes things harder in a different way. Jenna stopped by one afternoon, nervous and apologetic. She'd brought a card for Emma, handmade, full of glitter and stickers and a long written apology that Emma read 3 times before carefully tucking it into her treasure box. I'm not friends with Madison anymore, Jenna told us. I'm not sure I ever really was. I was just scared not to be. Marcus, listening from the kitchen, nodded approvingly. Takes courage to walk away from someone who has power over you. Good for you, kid. The juvenile court hearing was exactly as grim as I expected. Madison, dressed like she was going to church and crying on cue, received a sentence of 200 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and probation until her 18th birthday. Her friends got lighter sentences, 100 hours each and counseling. Patricia Cooper looked at me across the courtroom with undisguised hatred. But I looked at Emma, sitting between Marcus and me, and I felt only relief that my daughter would never have to fear Madison again. The judge had strong words for all 3 girls, but especially for Madison. You come from a family of privilege and influence, he said sternly. That privilege comes with responsibility. Responsibility to use your advantages to help others, not hurt them. You could have killed that child. The fact that you didn't is luck, not virtue. I hope you'll use this experience to become the kind of person who protects the vulnerable rather than targeting them. Madison nodded, still crying. And maybe some of those tears were real. Maybe she'd learned something. Or maybe she'd just learned to be more careful about who witnessed her cruelty. Either way, she'd leave Emma alone. The restraining order the judge issued made sure of that. Afterward, outside the courthouse, a reporter approached us. Mrs. Hartley, how do you feel about the outcome? I looked down at Emma, who was holding Marcus's hand and looking up at him with complete trust. I thought about how close I'd come to losing her. I thought about all the other families who'd faced the Coopers' power and backed down because they didn't have someone like Marcus, didn't have witnesses who'd finally speak up, didn't have the stubborn fury of a mother who'd had enough. I feel, I said carefully, like justice was served. Not perfectly maybe, but served nonetheless. And I feel grateful to everyone who told the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. What about the civil lawsuit the Coopers threatened? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I'm not worried about that. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and the truth is that their daughter nearly killed mine. The Coopers' lawsuit never materialized. Instead, they quietly put their house on the market 3 months later and moved to a different town. Starting over, I suppose, in a place where nobody knew Madison's story. I hoped she'd use the fresh start to become better. I suspected she'd just be more careful. Marcus eventually went back to his own life, though he visited often and always called Emma on Sundays. She'd started taking swimming lessons, real ones with a patient instructor who understood fear and how to work through it. She'd never be an Olympic swimmer, but she could hold her own in the water now, and more importantly, she'd learned that scary things could be faced and conquered. The town changed too, in small ways. The lake got new safety regulations. The school district implemented a real anti-bullying program with actual teeth. Parents started speaking up more when they saw problems, no longer cowed by social pressure to keep quiet. And Emma, she kept making friends with the quiet kids, the new kids, the ones on the edges. She'd sit with them at lunch, include them in games, stand up for them when others were mean. She'd learned something I'd tried to teach her but never quite succeeded until that day at the lake. That kindness is important, but sometimes you also need someone strong in your corner. Someone who'll stand up when others won't. Someone who'll look the bullies in the eye and make them understand that actions have consequences. "Mom," Emma asked one night as I tucked her in, "do you think Uncle Marcus is a hero?" I thought about that, about Marcus's quiet strength, his willingness to stand between danger and the people he loved, his refusal to let the powerful hurt the powerless without answering for it. "Yes," I said, "I think he is. But you know what? You're a hero too." "Me? I'm just a kid." "You're a kid who told the truth even when it was scary, who made friends with someone who needed a friend, who survived something terrible and came out stronger." I kissed her forehead. "That's pretty heroic if you ask me." She smiled, a real smile that reminded me of before the divorce, before the move, before the lake. But also different now, knowing that the world could be cruel but that she had people who'd protect her, fight for her, stand with her. "Mom, I'm glad Uncle Marcus is scary when he needs to be." "Me too, baby. Me too." I turned out the light and stood in the doorway watching my daughter drift toward sleep. In the morning, we'd wake up and face whatever came next. But tonight, we were safe. We were together. And anyone who thought they could hurt my family without facing Marcus's particular brand of justice now knew better. The world was still hard. People could still be cruel. But we were harder. My daughter and I. We'd learned to hold our ground, to demand justice, to refuse to be quiet when speaking up mattered. And we had Uncle Marcus, who'd showed up when we needed him most and reminded everyone that some people, some families, you just don't mess with.